The Holy Roman Emperor's army reached Rome, breached the walls. The horde of mixed mercenaries overran Rome, forcing Pope Clement to flee along the high passageway to the fortress of Sant'Angelo, where he remained a prisoner while the German, Spanish, and Italian troops looted, ravaged, and burned Rome, destroying sacred works of art, smashing altars, marble statues of Mary, the prophets, and saints, melting bronze figures for cannon, stained glass windows for lead, lighting fires on the inlaid marble floors of the Vatican, putting out the eyes in paintings, dragging a statue of Pope Clement into the street and hacking it to pieces. What of my Pietà? My Sistine ceiling, groaned Michelangelo. What of my studio? The Moses and the two slaves, they can be lying in 1,000 pieces. Spina arrived late at night. He had been to a series of feverish meetings at the Medici Palace, and then at the Signoria Palace. With the exception of a core of die-hard Medici adherents, all Florentines were agreed that the Medici must be deprived of their power. With Pope Clement a prisoner, the Republic could once again be proclaimed. Ippolito, Alessandro, and the Cardinal of Cortona would be allowed to leave peacefully, and that, concluded Spina thoughtfully, should be the end of Medici rule for a very long time. Michelangelo was silent. The new sacristy, Spina hung his head. It must be locked. The Medici are my nemesis, he cried in agony. All these years of work for Leo and Clement, and what have I to show for them? 6 rough-hewn blocks, the half-finished interior of a chapel. With Clement a prisoner, the Roviers will descend on me again. He sat down hard on his workbench. Spina spoke softly. I shall recommend you for an office of the Republic. Once your government is secure, we can persuade the Signoria that the chapel is for Il Magnifico, whom all Tuscans revere. Then we will get permission to unlock the doors and start work again. He boarded up the house across from San Lorenzo, with its drawings and clay models, returned to the Via Mozza and plunged abruptly into a block to define a victory, one of the original concepts for Julius' tomb. It emerged as a classic Greek youth, well-proportioned, though not as muscular as others he had carved. He worked well with his hands, the chisels ploughing the pliant marble, but before long he realized that his head was not working at all. Victory? Over whom? Over what? He did not know who was the victor. How could he determine who was the vanquished? Under the feet of the victor, defeated and crushed, he carved the face and head of an old man himself, as he might look 10 or 20 years from now, with his beard grown full and white. What had defeated him? Age? Was youth the victor, since it was the only period in which one could imagine that one could be a victor? The defeated one had experience, a deep knowing and suffering in his face, bent under the knee of the youth. Was that what happened to experience and wisdom? Was it always crushed and destroyed by time in the guise of youth? Outside his studio, the Republic of Florence was triumphant. Niccolo Capio Capone was elected Gonfaloniere to govern in the Soderini tradition. For its protection, the city-state had adopted Machiavelli's revolutionary plan for a militia of citizens trained, armed, and equipped to defend the Republic against invaders. Florence once ruled not only by its signoria, but by a council of 80, which represented the old families. Trade was active, the city prosperous, the people happy in their regained freedom. Few cared what happened to Pope Clement, still prisoner in Sant'Angelo, defended by a few adherents, among them Benvenuto Cellini, the young sculptor who had refused to be apprenticed by Torrigiani. But Michelangelo was vitally interested in Pope Clement. He had put 4 years of loving work into the sacristy. There were partially finished blocks in the now locked and sealed chapel, to whose future he was dedicated. He kept a close watch on Clement's fate. Pope Clement was in danger from 2 sides. The Church was being broken up into national units, with power drained away from Rome. It was not merely that the Lutherans were sweeping through mid-Europe. Cardinal Wolsey of England proposed a council of free cardinals in France to set up a new government for the Church. The Italian cardinals were meeting at Parma to establish their own hierarchy. The French cardinals were setting up papal vicars. Charles' German and Spanish troops quartered in Rome were still sacking, destroying, demanding ransom to get out. from St. Angelo, Clement tried to raise the money, forced to sacrifice hostages to the enemy. Jacopo Salviati was dragged through the streets to the gallows and almost hanged. The months went by. Intrigue grew in every country for a new distribution of power, for a new pope, a council, a reformation. At the end of the year of our Lord, 1527, the tide turned. A virulent plague decimated the Holy Roman Emperor's armies. The German troops hated Rome, were desperately anxious to return home. A French army invaded Italy to fight the Holy Roman Empire. Clement agreed to pay the invaders 300,000 ducats within 3 months. The Spanish army was withdrawn from the base of Sant'Angelo, and after 7 months of incarceration, Pope Clement fled, disguised as a merchant, making his way to Orvieto. Michelangelo promptly received a communication from Clement. Was Michelangelo still working for him? Would he continue to sculpture in the new sacristy? If so, Pope Clement had 500 ducats on hand, which he would send to him by messenger to cover the immediate costs. Michelangelo was deeply moved. The sorely harassed Pope, without funds or followers or prospects of regaining power, had sent words of affection and continued trust as he would have to any other member of his family. "I can't take Giulio's money," Michelangelo said to Spina as they conferred to the Via Mozza studio. "But couldn't I carve sometimes? If I slipped in unseen at night, it could not hurt Florence." "Patience. In a year or two, the Council of 80 is apprehensive about what Clement may do. They would consider your working on the chapel an act of disloyalty." With warm weather, the plague struck Florence. People came down with crushing headaches, pain in the back and limbs, fever, vomiting, and in 3 days were dead. If they dropped in the streets, they were left there. If they died in their houses, their families fled. Thousands of Florentines perished. The city became a morgue. Buonarrota summoned his brother to the house on the Via Ghibellina. "Michelangelo, I'm frightened for Bartolomea and the children. Could I move up to your house in Sant'Agnano? We'd be safe there." "Certainly." "Take father with you." "I won't go," growled Lodovico. "When a man is in his mid-80s, he has a right to die in his own bed." Fate was waiting for Buonarrota at Sant'Agnano, in the room where he had been born. By the time Michelangelo reached there, Buonarrota was delirious. His tongue was swollen and covered with a dry yellowish fuzz. Jovan Simone had moved Buonarrota's wife and children to safety the day before. The servants and contadini had fled. Michelangelo drew a chair up to his brother's bed, thinking how much alike they still looked. Buonarrota's eyes lightened in alarm at the sight of his brother. "Michelangelo, don't stay. The plague." Michelangelo wet his brother's parched lips with a damp cloth, murmured, "I will not leave you. You're the only member of our family who has loved me. I always loved you, but I've been a burden. Forgive me." "There's nothing to forgive, Buonarrota. Had I kept you by my side all during the years, I would have been much better off." Buonarrota managed a weary smile. "Michelangelo, you always were good." By sundown, Buonarrota was dying. Michelangelo encircled him with his left arm, his brother's head resting on his chest. Buonarrota woke only once, saw Michelangelo's face held close to his own. The pain-caused furrows eased. Resignation spread its calm unguent. In a few moments he was dead. Michelangelo carried his brother in a blanket to the graveyard behind the church. There were no coffins, no diggers. He dug a grave, lowered Buonarrota into the hole, summoned the priest, waited until Buonarrota had been sprinkled with holy water and blessed. Then he shoveled earth into the grave, filled it. He returned to the Via Mozza, burned his clothes in the backyard, scrubbed himself in his wooden tub in water hot as he could stand. He did not know whether this helped against the plague, nor did he greatly care. Word was brought to him that Simone, his oldest nephew, was also dead of the plague. Michelangelo thought, perhaps Buonarrota was the fortunate one. If he had caught the disease, he had but a few hours to put his affairs in order. He drew up a paper paying back to Buonarrota's wife the dowry she had brought with her, a young woman she would need it to get a second husband. He arranged for his 11-year-old niece, Cecca, to be put into the convent of Boldrone, providing for her keep and education by assigning produce from 2 of his farms. He set aside assets to pay for the education of his nephews, Leonardo and little Buonarrotino. When Granacci banged on the locked door, Michelangelo cried, "Go away. I've been exposed to the plague. I may have caught it. Don't be shosho, silly. You're too crusty to die. Open up. I've got a bottle of wine to ward off evil spirits. Granacci, go home and drink by yourself. I'm not going to be the cause of killing you. Maybe if you stay alive, you'll paint one more good picture." "Now isn't that an inducement?" laughed Granacci. "Allora, if you're still alive tomorrow, come finish your half of the Chianti." The plague abated. People filtered down from the surrounding hills. Shops reopened. The Signoria returned to the city. One of its first resolutions was to commission Michelangelo Buonarroti to carve the Hercules which Soderini had ordered 20 years before, out of the block that Bandinelli had messed up to its navel. Once again Pope Clement interfered, having returned to the Vatican by making an alliance with the Holy Roman Emperor. He resumed power over the renegade Italian. French and English cardinals formed an army out of the forces of the Duke of Urbino. The Colonna and Spanish troops, this army was being sent against independent Florence to wipe out the Republic, punish the enemies of the Medici, and once again restore the family to power. Spina had underestimated Pope Clement and the Medici. Michelangelo was summoned before the Signoria, where Gonfalonier Coponi sat at Soderini's desk, surrounded by his aide in office. "Since you are a sculptor, Buonarroti," he said in a rushing voice, "we assume you can also be a defense engineer. We need walls that cannot be breached, since they are of stone, and you are a man of stone." Michelangelo gulped. Now he would really be involved on both sides. "Confine yourself to the south of the city. We are impregnable from the north. Report at the quickest possible moment." He explored along the several miles of wall that began on the east with the hillside church of San Miniato, and snaked its way westward before returning to the Arno. Neither the walls nor defense towers were in a good state of repair, nor were there ditches on the outside to make the enemy approach more hazardous. Stones were loose, badly baked bricks were crumbling, more towers for cannon were needed, additional height to make scaling a longer task. The anchor of the defense line would have to be the Campanile of San Miniato, from whose height of the defenders could command most of the ground over which the enemy troops would have to charge. He returned with his report to Gonfalonier Caponi and the Signoria, laying out before them the number of stonemasons, brickmakers, carters, peasants he would need to make the walls defensible. The Gonfalonier cried impetuously, "Do not touch San Miniato. There is no need to fortify a church." "There is every need, Excellency, for if we do not, the enemy will not need to break down the walls. They will turn our flank here, east of the San Miniato hill." He was given permission to prove that his plan was the best one possible. He pressed everyone into service: Granacci, the company of the Cauldron, the masons from the Duomo workyard, where before he had scoured the countryside seeking a figure, a face, a husky arm or elongated sunburnt throat for a statue or painting. Now he searched for stonemasons, quarriers from Maiano and Prato, carpenters, brickmakers, mechanics to stem a war. Work went ahead at full speed, for the Pope's army was reported moving on Florence from several directions, a formidable force of trained men and weapons. Michelangelo built a road up from the river for his men and supplies, began its bastions at the first tower outside the gate of San Miniato toward San Giorgio, closing the vital defense hill with high walls of brick made of pounded earth mixed with flax or tow and cattle dung, or 100 contadini working in teams, throwing up the walls as fast as they could get the bricks squared. The stone masons cut, chipped, shaped, shoring up weak stretches, adding height to the walls and towers, erecting new areas at the more vulnerable spots. When the first phase of his work was completed, the Signoria made an inspection. The next morning, when he entered the corner office overlooking the Piazza della Signoria, and the tight-knit roofs of Florence, he was greeted with smiles. Michelangelo, you have been elected to the Nova della Milizia, the Militia 9, as Governor General of the Fortifications. It is a great honor, Gonfalonier, and a greater responsibility. We want you to make an inspection trip to Pisa and Livorno to make sure our defenses from the sea are secure. There was no further thought of sculpture, nor could he cry. War is not my trade. He had a specific job to do. Florence had called on him in its time of crisis. He had never imagined himself a commander, an organizer, but now he found that evolving intricate works of art had taught him how to coordinate each mounting detail to accomplish a finished result. He might even wish he had a little of Leonardo da Vinci's inventiveness with machines. On his return from Pisa and Livorno, he began a series of ditches as deep as moats, using the excavated earth and rock to form a further series of barricades. His next move was to secure permission to level all buildings between the defense walls and base of the encircling foothills, a mile to the south, terrain over which the papal army would have to attack. The militia used battering rams of the kind the ancients used to knock down the farmhouses and the village homes. The farmers helped to level houses that had been in their families for hundreds of years. The wealthy protested against the wrecking of their palaces. Not without reason, Michelangelo acknowledged, since they were so beautifully built. Only a few of the soldiers could be induced to level the several small chapels. When he himself came to the refectory of San Salvi and saw Andrea del Sarto's Last Supper shining in all its brilliance of the half-raised walls, he cried out, "Let it be. It is too great a work of art to be destroyed." The leveling job was just finished when he received word that the Via Mozza studio had been broken into. Models were thrown to the floor, folios of drawings and sketches scattered in wild confusion, many missing, as well as 4 models in wax. He saw the glitter of metal on the floor. Leaning over, he picked up a chisel from among a pile of papers. It was the kind used in a goldsmith's shop. He walked to the home of his friend Piloto, who knew the local goldsmiths. "Do you recognize this chisel?" "Yes, it belongs to Bandinelli." Very discreetly, the sketches and wax models were returned. Michelangelo instructed Mini to see that the studio was kept guarded. The Signoria dispatched him to Ferrara to study the Duke of Ferrara's new fortifications. The note he carried with him read, "We send to Ferrara our celebrated Michelangelo Buonarroti, as you are aware, a man of rare endowments for certain purposes which he will explain to you by word of mouth. We greatly desire that he should be recognized as a person highly esteemed by us and cherished, as his merits deserve. The Duke of Ferrara, a cultivated man of the Este family, and an enthusiast of painting, sculpture, poetry, the theater, urged him to be a guest at the palace. Michelangelo graciously declined, staying at an inn where he enjoyed an uproarious reunion with Argento, who brought in his 9 children to kiss Michelangelo's hand. "Well, Argento, have you become a good farmer?" Argento grimaced. "No, but the earth makes things grow no matter what I do to it. Children are my main crop, and mine is still trouble, Argento." When Michelangelo thanked the Duke of Ferrara for revealing his defense structures, the Duke said, "Make me a painting, then I shall be rewarded." Michelangelo grinned. As soon as this war is over, back in Florence he found that General Malatesta of Perugia had been brought to Florence to serve as one of the commanding generals. He quarreled immediately with Michelangelo's plan to throw up stone supports in the manner he had learned in Ferrara. "You've already burdened us with too many walls. Take your peasants away and let my soldiers defend Florence." Malatesta seemed cold, devious. At night Michelangelo roamed the base of his ramparts. He came upon the 8 pieces of artillery that had been given to Malatesta to defend the San Miniato wall. Instead of being placed inside the fortifications or on the parapets, they lay outside the walls, unguarded. Michelangelo woke the sleeping general. "What do you mean by exposing your artillery pieces that way? We guarded them with our lives until you arrived. They could be stolen or destroyed by anyone who stumbled upon them." "Are you the commander of the Florentine army?" demanded Malatesta, livid. "Just of the defense walls." "Then go make your cow dung brick and don't tell a soldier how to fight." Returning to San Miniato, Michelangelo encountered General Mario Orsini, who demanded, "What has gone wrong, my friend? Your face is on fire." Michelangelo told him when he had finished. Orsini replied sadly, "You must know that the men of his house are all traitors. In time he will betray Florence. Have you reported this to the Signoria? I am a hired officer, like Malatesta, not a Florentine." In the morning, Michelangelo waited in the great hall of the palace until he could be admitted to the Gonfalonier's office. The Signoria was not impressed. "Stop concerning yourself over our officers. Confine yourself to the new plans for the walls. They must not be breached." "They won't need to be, with Malatesta guarding them." "You are overwrought. Get some rest." He returned to the walls, continued to work under the broiling September sun, but he could not put Malatesta out of his mind. Everywhere he went he heard stories against the general. He had yielded Perugia without a battle. His men would not fight the Pope's troops at Arezzo. When the armies reached Florence, Malatesta would surrender the city. In his mind he went back time and again to the Signoria, pleading that Malatesta be removed. Seeing his labors in building impregnable walls going for nothing as Malatesta opened the gates to the Pope's army. Or was it really to Gonfalonier Capone that he was protesting? Wasn't it to Pope Julius about Bramante's walls for St. Peter's, which were made of weak cement and would crumble? Had Malatesta demanded, "Are you the commander of the army?" Wasn't it Pope Julius who had asked, "Are you an architect?" He became agitated. He envisaged the Pope's troops destroying Florence, even as Rome had been, sacking, pillaging, smashing the works of art. Sleepless, unable to eat or to concentrate on directing his stone crews, he began to overhear shards of sentences which convinced him that Malatesta had gathered the officers on the south wall in a conspiracy against Florence. He went 6 days and nights without rest or nourishment, unable to control his anxieties. One night a voice spoke to him. He whirled about on the parapet. "Who are you?" "A friend." "What do you want?" "To save your life." "Is it in danger?" "Of the worst kind." "The Pope's army, Malatesta. What is he going to do?" "Have you killed?" "Why?" "For exposing his treason." "No one believes me." "Your corpse will be found at the base of the bastion." "I can protect myself." "Not in this mist." "What should I do?" "Flee." "That is the treason. Better than being dead." "When must I go?" "Now. I'm in charge here." "You haven't a moment." "How can I explain?" "Hurry." "My command, the walls." "Hurry, hurry." He descended from the parapet, crossing the Arno, took a back route to the Via Mozza. Figures emerged from the thick fog, half-formed like massed marble blocks. He ordered Mini to put clothes and money in their saddlebags. He and Mini mounted their horses at the Prato gate. They were challenged. A guard cried, "It is Michelangelo of the Militia 9. Let him by." He headed for Bologna, Ferrara, Venice, France, safety. He was back after 7 weeks, humiliated and in disgrace. The Signoria fined him and barred him from the council for 3 years. But because the papal armies were now camped 30,000 strong in the hills beyond his southern defense walls, they sent him back to his command. He had Granacci to thank for his reprieve. When the Signoria outlawed him, along with others who had taken flight, Granacci had secured a temporary commutation for him and sent Bastiano, who had helped Michelangelo repair the walls, in pursuit. "I must say the Signoria was lenient," he commented Granacci sternly, "considering that you have returned a full 5 weeks after the Rebel Exclusion Act. You can have lost all your property in Tuscany, and your head too, as Ficino's grandson lost his life for stating that the Medici seemed more entitled to rule than anyone else, considering their contribution to the city. You had better take a blanket up to San Miniato and enough victuals for a year's siege." "Don't worry, Granacci. I can't be that stupid twice." "What possessed you?" "I heard voices." "Whose?" "My own." Granacci grinned. "I was helped by the rumors of your reception at the court in Venice, the offer from the Doge to design a bridge over the Rialto, and the French ambassador's efforts to get you to the French court. The Signoria thought you were an idiot, which you are, but a great artist, which you are. They weren't happy about your settling in Venice or Paris. Just thank your stars that you know how to chip marble, or you might never again have lived in the sight of the Duomo." Michelangelo looked out the third-floor window of Granacci's study to where Brunelleschi's glorious red tile dome stood in its spatial majesty against a stormy sunset. The finest architectural form in the world is the bull of the sky, he mused, and do you know, Brunelleschi's dome is equally beautiful.